What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to talk about exercise technique for free weight and machine training. Let's get it popping. So here are the main points we're going to discuss in today's presentation. Number one, talk about the general techniques that we need to focus on when performing resistance training exercises. Number two, talk about some breathing guidelines when you're resistance training. Number three, when should you wear a belt and when should you not wear a belt? Number four, proper recommendations for spotting, especially free weight exercises. And then number five, teaching proper resistance training exercise and spotting techniques. So first, talk about some different fundamentals. Your hand grip is going to be important. To understand what hand grip position is, we need to know a few different terms. A pronated grip, or when palms are down. This is otherwise referred to as the overhand grip. Pronated, letter P, palms down. Supinated grip, the palms are going to be up. Supination, kind of like you're holding a bowl of soup. Soup starts with the letter S. Supinated also starts with the letter S. So palms are up. This is known as the underhand grip. In the neutral grip, the knuckles point laterally, kind of like you're doing a handshake. Or you could think about it as your palms are facing each other. Alternated grip is one grip is pronated while the other hand is supinated. Hook grip is a pronated grip, except the thumb is on the bar and then your fingers wrap around that thumb. On the next slide, we'll show some pictures of what each of these different grips are. Now, no matter these grips here, which position they are, when the thumb is wrapped around the bar, this is considered to be a closed grip position. When the thumb does not wrap around the bar, the grip is called an open or a false grip position. And this can be useful and valuable, especially with people with some shoulder issues who are not able to hold the bar with the thumb wrapped around. However, we never, ever want to use a false grip on a bench press that uses a barbell. And the reason we don't want that to happen is we don't want it to slip off your palms and crush your neck. So whenever performing some sort of bench press or variation with a bar, we always use a closed grip, meaning that thumb is wrapped around the bar. So here are different positions there for these different grips. Palms down, okay, figure one or letter A here would be a pronated grip. Letter B, palms up, that would be a supinated grip. Letter C here, notice it's alternating. One is pronated, one is supinated. And letter D here, this is mainly focused on the hook grip. So notice your thumb is around the bar, but your fingers go around your thumb. Reason people like to use the hook grip here is that it's probably one of the strongest grips you can have on the bar. Comparing this grip to this grip up here, okay, is not nearly as strong. Now the downside is when first learning to use the hook grip, it is very painful on your thumbs. For myself, when I learned how to use the hook grip, it took me a month of using hook grip on most of my exercises before I got used to feeling that pressure on my thumbs. And I'm telling you, it is well worth it. Because especially myself, being someone who usually had sweaty palms, this hook grip here helped me provide me the best grip on the bar. Now, in all of these grips here, notice that the thumb wraps around the bar, whether it be a hook grip where the fingers are around the thumb, or in a supinated grip, okay, or one of those other grips there, where the thumb still wraps around the bar, but your fingers are not on top of your thumb. All these then would consider to be closed grips. If the thumb was not wrapped around the bar, so let's say, looking at this grip up here, instead of the thumb being here, let's say it was on the bottom side of the bar. That would be considered to be an open grip or a false grip. And I can't re-emphasize enough here, we never, ever want an open grip or a false grip when performing a bench press using a barbell, because we don't want that bar to slip off your palms and accidentally come down and hit you in the throat. Along with different hand positions there, we can also change the width of our grips. three most common ones that we oftentimes see are wide grip, narrow, or a medium or a common grip. So if we're looking at our typical barbell here, if I held the bar at each of these endpoints there, that'd be probably the more common grip there, or a medium grip. Wide grip meaning grab it farther on the bar, closer towards the end, versus narrow grip, grab it closer in compared to that common grip. One reason we might do this is we want to bias certain muscles when performing a similar exercise. So for example, if I'm performing a barbell bench press with a wide grip, I'm going to put greater stress on my chest and anterior shoulder muscles, versus a narrow grip is going to put greater stress on your triceps. When getting to a good position there to lift weights there, oftentimes we want to make sure our body is stable and we want to have optimal limb positioning when we're in our particular position. The reason we want a stable position is, number one, it helps keep the body in proper alignment, okay, which means that our muscles are adequately stressed and joints are adequately stressed, instead of certain muscles or joints being overstressed when performing a particular exercise. One example of this would be when performing a squat. We want to make sure our torso is all in alignment. We don't want to be hunched over like Quasimodo when performing a back squat. Because if we do that there, then your lower back muscles will have an excess amount of stress being placed upon them, and your lower vertebrae there will have excess amount of stress on them, and we don't want to see that. So making sure we have a stable position helps us keep our body in proper alignment. In addition, when we have a stable position there, it allows our body to be able to produce the most amount of force. Because if our body's in an unstable position, our body subconsciously wants to keep us protected. And if I'm unstable, my body's going to reduce the amount of force that we can apply with our muscles when performing that exercise. Therefore, we want to make sure our body's in a stable position so we can produce the maximum amount of force in that particular exercise. So no matter using free weights or machine exercises, we want to make sure our body's in a stable position. When performing some sort of supine exercise, there are 5 main points of contact that we want to maintain when performing that particular exercise. That's contact with the bench with your head, contact with the bench with your shoulders, contact with the bench with your butt, as well as contact with the floor with your right and left feet. Those are 5 different points of contact that we want to maintain when performing some sort of supine exercise, especially the bench press. The most common error I see when performing bench press is people will lift their hips off the bench in order to complete the lift. And they do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, by lifting your hips off the bench, the bar, instead of going directly above the chest, it's going to put the bar path closer towards the hips. And when that happens there, your body's at a stronger position when it can do that. Therefore, you're able to lift more weight when your hips come off the bench. Number two, people do this here because by forcefully lifting their hips off the bench, especially when the bar is on their chest, it helps get a little bit more momentum going upward in order to finish the lift. However, when you lift your hips off the bench there, it puts excess amount of stress on your lower back muscles, therefore maybe causing your lower back muscles to cramp and or may tweak those lower back muscles. And that's why we want to make sure our butt stays on the bench when performing any sort of bench press exercise. When we're performing exercises that are standing, typically our feet are going to be slightly wider than hip width apart. Additionally, we want our feet flat on the ground with the balls of our feet and our heels being in contact with the ground at all times. When performing seated or supine exercises, again, follow those 5 points of body contact positions as mentioned previously. Moving on to some more fundamentals of exercise technique, let's talk about range of motion and speed. In general, we want to put the exercise through a full range of motion, maintaining proper exercise technique. What this will do, number one there, is help improve or maintain flexibility in that particular joint. In addition, by going through a full range of motion, it's going to force the person to use lighter weight on the bar to get the same benefits or stimulus to the muscle, and thus, therefore, having lighter weight on the bar but getting the same muscle stimulus means that we work out, we get the same muscular benefits without the added stress of having a heavier weight on our bodies. In order to go through this full range of motion safely, it is recommended that you perform slow, controlled movements through that full range of motion. However, if our goal is to work on more power and explosiveness, there will be times and places where you need to go through the range of motion very quickly. So again, in general, slow, controlled movements going through the full range of motion is what we want to see with our lifting exercises. But if the goal is power, then we need to make sure that we perform quicker movements that move fast through those ranges of motion. When breathing, okay, oftentimes we'll use different breathing techniques to help us get through sticking points in our particular exercises. The sticking point on each exercise might vary depending on the particular exercise, as well as which muscle groups the particular athlete is strong in, as well as different dimensions of your arms and legs and torsos, things along those lines. Typically, though, we'll reach a sticking point somewhere in that particular movement. Typically, it's the point where you're going to fail at. And typically, this occurs shortly after the transition from the eccentric phase to the concentric phase. So, for example, when performing a bench press, from when I touch my chest until I lock it out, I'm oftentimes going to reach a sticking point somewhere shortly after I come off of my chest. In order to help get through this sticking point, especially as we get closer to failure there, we need to we want to instruct our athletes to exhale or breathe out through the sticking point. So when we reach that sticking point, we should be breathing out with the air there. And then typically we're going to inhale during the less stressful phase of the repetition, oftentimes meaning when the bar is coming down. For example, if I'm performing a bench press, I'm going to typically going to breathe in as the bar approaches my chest, and I'm going to breathe out as I push the bar away from my chest. For experienced weightlifters, they might perform what's called a Valsalva maneuver. The purpose of the Valsalva maneuver there is keeps your vertebral alignment in place and helps support your spine, especially during heavy maximal lifts. This is just a fancy way of saying keeps your torso in line and helps keep your core muscles there safe. What this requires there, it means that you're trying to breathe out or expiring air against a closed glottis, meaning that your throat is closed. And what this does is it creates pressure in your abdomen or in your torso there, okay, which helps maintain a rigid spine throughout that entire movement, so our posture is maintained through it and helps prevent our spine from rounding excessively. So here's a diagram of the human body. Here's the glottis. Okay, your glottis is closed when performing the Valsalva maneuver there. Okay? And what this does is there, when the glottis is closed, it creates a lot of pressure there in your torso. Okay? And by creating a lot of pressure in your torso, helps maintain that proper posture position and keeps your torso in line, which minimizes excessive bending there at the spine. So again, for most exercises, we're going to exhale through the sticking point of the concentric phase and inhale during the eccentric phase. With well-trained athletes there, they might use the Valsalva maneuver when performing heavy compound exercises, such as back squats, front squats, RDLs. And that, again, helps maintain proper posture throughout the movement, helping keep the athlete safer. Now, a lot of athletes will use weight belts to help assist with keeping that intra-abdominal pressure there that the Valsalva maneuver entails. Weightlifting belts should be worn in proper context. Oftentimes, they should be worn when performing exercises that place an excessive amount of stress on the lower back. For example, if I'm performing cable triceps press downs, cable tricep press downs use the lower back very little, if at all. So I probably should not use a weightlifting belt when performing cable triceps press downs. However, during barbell back squats, that places a lot of stress on your lower back. Therefore, using a weightlifting belt when performing back squats, that would be an opportune time to use a weightlifting belt. Another time, though, is weightlifting belts shouldn't be used for all sets of a lower back intensive movement. It should really only be saved for the sets that involve near maximal or maximal loads. So for example, this squatter right here is lifting very heavy weights. So because of that using a weight belt in this case would be optimal or would be preferred. However, if he just had one plate on each side, let's say he had one red plate on each side, because he's strong enough to lift several plates, when performing warm-up sets, he should not be using a weightlifting belt because that's not going to assist him because it doesn't need to create as much intra-abdominal pressure in order to support his spine with warm-up sets. In addition, another reason why we don't want to use belts when performing warm-up sets there is a lot of times in our sports or activities, we might have to brace in that particular activity. For example, if I'm a soccer player and I perform a header and an opponent is coming to perform a header, our bodies will probably collide when performing that header. Therefore, my body needs to learn how to brace the core, to brace for impact for that particular athlete coming in, and I don't have a weightlifting belt when I'm actually running on the soccer field to help absorb that impact. So therefore, I do need to teach my body how to properly brace, and therefore, at lighter loads, when it's safer, that would be a great opportune time to teach your body how to do that. And so therefore, let's not use weightlifting belts on lighter sets because when they're not needed for those lighter sets, it'll help teach yourself to actually properly brace for use during athletic competitions. Now, it's important that we spot free weight exercises, okay, to help with safety there. Okay. We call someone who spots, okay, or helps keep things safe when performing a weightlifting exercise there, we call that person a spotter. Oftentimes it's a teammate, another student, or a coach there to help with the spotting. It's important that we educate our athletes how to properly spot correctly there. In addition to the safety part, a spotter might also help motivate the athlete when performing their exercises there. It might help perform forced repetitions or basically help assist their partner there finish the repetition when they've run out of energy to complete the actual repetition. These are also known as partner-assisted reps. For those of you who are not very squeamish, okay, or are willing to educate yourselves a little bit more on the importance of having proper spotters, watch this video, okay, to understand why having proper spotting is very important, because poor spotting can lead to serious injuries. For those of you who do not want to watch this clip here, basically it's this clip of a football player who, while performing a bench press, dropped the bar on his neck, okay, causing serious injury to that particular person. By having proper spotters, okay, that would help prevent the risk of that bar actually getting dropped on the person's neck. In addition, it's also a reason why, as I mentioned previously, we always want to have closed grips, meaning the thumb wraps around the bar when performing a barbell bench press. Do not perform barbell bench presses with a false grip, meaning with that thumb not around the bar. Usually spotters are required for free weight exercises mainly. And typically, when you have a bar that's positioned over the head, it's a good idea to have a spotter, a bar positioned on the back, a bar racked on the front of your shoulders, or any sort of bar passing over the face. We do not, I repeat, do not want to spot power exercises. Things like Olympic lifts, which are very fast in nature. Never, ever spot Olympic lifts. When performing Olympic lifts, it's important that you teach your athletes how to ditch the bar safely so that they don't get crushed by the bar. Because Olympic lifts and power exercises are so fast, we usually don't have time to spot them correctly. So when performing overhead exercises or performing an exercise where the bar is on the back or the front of the shoulders, for example, in this back squat here, ideally this should be performed inside a power rack with crossbars in place at appropriate heights. In this particular rack, the crossbars are these straps. Notice these heavy-duty straps go down and around the bar. And what these straps do is, if this person would fail and the bar would drop to the ground, instead of the bar dropping on him and crushing the athlete, the bar will be caught by these heavy-duty straps there, preventing the bar from crushing him. Depending on the equipment, a lot of racks there will have horizontal metal bars that go out. Make sure you set them up high enough so that, again, the bar is caught in case this athlete gets into trouble. In addition, when performing these types of exercises there, it's important that we have spotters making sure to keep the athlete safe. When performing squats, at least we want to have a spotter in the back. Now notice this spotter in the back there is squatting down with the athlete. The spotter squatting from the back there is squatting very close. Okay? Not only is this spotter very close there, his arms are around and underneath the armpits. That's important because if this athlete gets in trouble, this athlete or this spotter here will catch and grab the athlete to pick them up. Now, speaking of catching and grabbing, if you are working with female athletes, instead of having your palms open like this, make sure your hands are in fists. I repeat, when spotting female athletes, make sure your hands are in fists and not open palmed. Reason being, if the athlete gets in trouble, okay, you do not want to grab to try to pick them up there and having open palms and accidentally grab the women athletes' breasts. That would not be good. Okay? So make sure when spotting female athletes there, make sure your fists are closed. You can still grab and scoop them. In addition, when possible, it's typically ideal to have at least one spotter on each side when performing a squat. Each of these spotters, notice they're focused on the ends of the bars and making sure their hands are directly below the bars, ready to help grab and take the bar if the athlete gets in trouble. Now you'll see some athletes will perform these overhead exercises or the bars on the back or the front of the shoulders, and they will do this out of a rack, meaning you don't have these safety bars or safety straps to help you if you get into trouble. Okay? If that's the case there, you've got to make sure that you're trained properly to do these exercises outside of a rack. And even then, I would still recommend having spotters in case you get in trouble. Finally, make sure that if you're going to do it without spotters especially, you know how to ditch the bar should you get in trouble. Now, over the face exercises, so things like bench presses. Oftentimes, it is ideal that the spotter in the back grasp the bar with an alternated grip. Okay. So for example here, notice one palm up, one palm down. Going either both palms up or both palms down typically is tough to do when you get to heavy weights. In addition, if it's heavy enough weight, like in this case here for this particular athlete, it's probably good to have a spotter on either side as well. Now, in certain exercises, such as lying triceps extensions or barbell pullovers, the spotter in the back might use an alternated grip to pick the bar up off the floor there, but when spotting it, might use a supinated grip, meaning both hands will be palms up. Once the athlete starts doing the exercise, that might be more advantageous there in that particular case. It depends on what the spotter is comfortable with, and in the particular situation. Next up, instead of bars there, sometimes we need to spot athletes who are lifting dumbbells. And I'll show you what's the incorrect way to spot holding a dumbbells, and then the correct way to spot loading the dumbbells. On the left, here's the incorrect way. And I see this happen oftentimes in weight rooms. What the spotter will do is put hands close to the elbows, and we'll try to lift from the elbows. However, this is not a good idea because in my experience, when performing bench presses, if someone's going to fail on the bench press, these dumbbells are going to fall in. When they fall in, it runs the risk of collapsing onto the chest and or hitting the athlete in the face. That's not safe. The better way to do it is to grab around the wrists instead. When grabbing around the wrist there, now you've got control of where those dumbbells go. Grabbing around the wrists is a lot safer than grabbing around the elbows. So make sure, when spotting dumbbells, make sure we spot it by grabbing around the wrists, not the elbows. How many spotters you need depends on how much weight is being lifted, the experience of the spotters, as well as a particular setup for the particular lift there. In the weight room here, we had test outs for our football players, and some of our football players were squatting above 600 pounds. In that case there, we needed 5 spotters to safely spot them because we started running out of room on the ends of the bars. So, depending on the particular situation, you might need more spotters than just one. Number 2, when spotting, the athlete and spotters need to be in proper communication. One of these ways is we need to make sure that the liftoff is properly communicated between the athlete and the spotter. Liftoff refers to moving the bar from the rack there into a position where the athlete can begin the exercise. I oftentimes recommend a liftoff when performing a bench press. So the spotter will help lift the bar off the rack and get the bar into proper position and then let go so the athlete can perform bench presses. There also needs to be communication between the athlete and spotter in how many repetitions are being performed, as well as when the spotter should help should the athlete get in trouble. In general here, when you as a spotter see the bar or weight start to move down when the weight should be moving up, that's when you should definitely help grab the weight or grab the dumbbells or grab the wrists there to help your friend or partner there finish the rep. So, meaning if I'm performing a bench press and I start pushing it off my chest, which is a good thing, but then I get stuck and it starts to come back down towards my chest, at that point, as a spotter, I should immediately grab the bar and help spot them to finish the rep. That's all I got. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a good day. Booyah.